Morning, folks. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School. And again, out here at the Pathfinder School in Southeast Ohio, we teach lots and lots of classes on basic survival, intermediate, advanced survival, bushcraft 101, advanced bushcraft, ropes and rigging, plants, navigation, wilderness first aid. We are a Red Cross training facility out here at the school. So if you're interested in those classes, go to selfrelianceoutfitters.com and drop down menu for survival training, and you'll see all of our classes on that listing. Now, back to the video for today. Yesterday we talked about following up with a part 3 on the squirrel camp video and talking about the different boxes and kits. I went out squirrel hunting, got a squirrel, came back, and I'm going to show you how to cook that squirrel up with a special recipe. And this recipe was used this weekend at the squirrel camp by Nathan Lodgen, whose YouTube channel is 20th Century Adventures. His business is Lodgen & Co. on the internet if you want to look at his website for reproduction clothing and accoutrements. We're going to use his recipe this morning. The parboiling is the important part of any small game, especially something with a lot of muscle like rabbit and squirrel. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. We'll cook up a meal, we'll eat some breakfast, and then we will clean up our dishes and we'll start to break down with the chuck box first. And that video today will be basically on the chuck box itself and what I've got out here to cook with. Stay with me, we'll get started. All right, so the first thing you're going to do with most small game animals, after you have skinned them and all of that stuff, is you're going to want to quarter that animal and you're going to want to parboil it. And the reason for that parboiling is to soften up all this muscle and tissue. All right, if you cook this squirrel just like it is right now, Zon thinks he's going to get some of this. He ain't right now. Get out of there, mister. If you cook this squirrel the way it is right now, all these muscles are going to be tough and the meat is going to be nasty to try to eat, and it's going to be rough to try to eat. Now, a squirrel is the only animal other than humans that have a clavicle right here. So when you take that arm off, you got to get down below that to the joint and cut through it, okay? When you're quartering that up, and get rid of that. So again, we're parboiling this animal for about 15 minutes at a rolling boil. And that's going to loosen up all that muscle and make it much more tender when we go to fry it. Very important if you want this stuff to be any kind of palatable at all in camp. All right, let's see what we got going on here. Oh yeah. All right, we'll give that about 15 minutes to soften that meat up. Get that parboiled, and we'll be ready to rock and roll. All right, once we've got this thing to the point where it's boiled for 15 minutes, we're gonna set it off to the side here and kind of let it cool down a little bit and get our fire ready for the next step. All right, so let's get our skillet ready here. We'll put it on the fire and we'll get a little bit of lard in that dude. Get that melted in there good. About a half a tablespoon is probably enough, to be honest with you. Okay. Now, we got some flour right here in a gold pan. Okay, and gold pans were something that would be commonly carried because they made a good plate, but they also could be used for panning gold. So someone who was land cruising, prospecting, hunting, things like that, may come across a stream. He may want to pan for some gold while the hunting is not great, or if he's bored, whatever the case may be, but he may be able to supplement his income by some flour gold. So a gold pan is always a good carry. Again, it makes a great plate anyway. And this is an old style gold pan without the heavy ridges in it. We're going to take some buttermilk, and this is a cooler from the 1930s, and it actually is very much like a thermos, except it has a mason jar inside of it, an old Atlas mason jar, okay? And inside, around the Atlas mason jar, is corrugated cardboard insulation, and this was for holding liquid. So we've got our buttermilk in here to keep it nice and cool. And as long as we keep that in a good shady area in the winter like it is right now, That's going to keep for a couple days, no problem. Okay. The cat thinks it needs some buttermilk here. All right, let's get our squirrel over here. Now we've got a couple more things to do here. So what we're going to do with this squirrel, we don't want to get our skillet too hot, so we're going to set it off to the side for just a second. What we're going to do with our squirrel is we're going to grab a piece of it out and put it in the buttermilk, and we're going to dredge it around that buttermilk really, really good. Get it coated well. And I'll go ahead and get all 4 of those quarters out of here. We'll pick those up. And we've got some seasoning here. This is not just salt. It's actually a seasoning mixture that I use. And we'll keep that to the side here. And what we're going to do is we're going to, after we dredge these in the buttermilk, we're going to get them in the flour. Just like this. Get those things coated well with that flour. Shake it off a little bit. Stick it in our skillet. Move on to the next one. Same story, right? Buttermilk, flour. We'll get our seasoning on there in just a minute. Okay. Pretty good. All right, we'll get these on the fire in this grease here. If we need a little bit more grease, that's not a big deal. We can always shovel just a little bit more in there. All right, now get just a little seasoning in here. Get that frying up good. So you pretty much have already cooked this meat when you parboiled it. And now you're just kind of pan frying it to get that crispy outer layer on there, get some seasoning stuck to it. You're gonna be in good shape. Give them dudes one more flip over here real quick. Here's another tip or trick I'm going to give you. This is our pot that we parboiled in, okay? The lid is a perfect fit for the skillet. Multifunctionality within your kit is really what's important, okay? All right, while the squirrel's cooling down, we'll warm us up some water, make us a little hot chocolate on a cool morning, and get after it. Fellas, ain't much beyond just sitting down and having a decent breakfast now. Squirrel meat comes right off the bone. All right, parboil makes it perfect. Man, That's so good. Holy cow. Oh yeah. Tell you what, tastes awesome. The buttermilk was the key to that whole thing. You know, parboiling the squirrel. Hey. Parboiling the squirrel, all that. That's kind of standard procedure for small game, especially muscly small game, rabbit and squirrel, things like that. You want to parboil that meat before you cook it, because if you don't, it's going to be difficult to eat, for sure. You're going to have a hard time. It's going to taste muscly and nasty. It's not going to be palatable meat. You want a good, nice, heavy thigh like this bad boy right here that you can just take and pull the meat right off the bone. You're going to get that only by parboiling. Otherwise, you're going to have a pan full of crap to eat, for sure. All right, so we're done with our campfire this morning. We got everything kind of cleaned up and sitting out here drying. And thought we'd go ahead and start with the chuck box, pack that back up and talk about it and show you how all this stuff goes together and go from there. Stay with me. All right, like I said, I think we'll start with the chuck box here. So we'll just take the rest of the stuff out of it so we can pull it off. We'll take this hot chocolate off the top. We've got our dishes done and sitting over there. This is our kind of utensil sleeve here. We'll set it down for a minute, talk about it in a few minutes. We got some flour, got a rack here we'll talk about. We'll pull this out. And then we'll take this box and turn it back up just like this to put our stuff back into, okay? And I'll just put it down here on the ground so we can all see it real well, and I'll open the lid, okay? Now, I've got a roll of paper towel here. Remember what we talked about that whole, when it was invented stuff and design changes. Paper towel is paper towel, okay? This stuff was invented in the 1870s and by Scott. So if you've got a roll of paper towel in camp, you're not violating any rules. And like I showed in one video recently, this can be your next fire mentality, because if you use this for a grease trap in a pan with eggs, bacon, and things like that in it, you cooked in grease, the next morning, you've got a greasy rag you can use to start your fire with, okay? So remember that, because that's just a quick tip and trick, all right? All right, so the first thing that's gonna go in here is our Forest Service skillet. And it's a folding handle skillet. Again, this is the one I designed our current folding handle skillet off of. And it sits in the bottom, and other things go inside that. So the next thing is our large pot. Remember that this pot has a lid that also fits the skillet. So it's a 2-for-1 deal. Fits it like it was made for it. You're gonna have to search around for this stuff. It's not gonna fall in your lap, right? But you can find it. We'll take the lid off this because the other thing's gonna go inside here, all right? Set it in, just like this. Now, the next thing that we're gonna put in here is gonna be a bowl. We've got 2 of these that nest inside of each other, like this. This one here is a Taco, which was a company connected to Wherever. And this one here is a Wherever, okay? Those go inside that particular pot. So they nest 3 pots inside each other, just like that. Now, inside that, I put other things. I've got a can opener. I have a pack of Strike on the box matches. I have a pot chain. I have a handle, and again, you got to look for this kind of stuff, all right? This is an old handle. It's made for locking onto pots, and it locks really, really well because it's got an indention in it that locks on the lip. So if you need a handle for pots, if you were going to use something like this over the fire to cook, it gives you a saucepan option, okay? Again, multi-functionality of this stuff is the key. That goes inside there. Now, I've got a bag here that things go into, like condiments and lard. Those things go in that bag just to kind of keep them from leaking or getting on anything. And I put them in that bowl as well. I also have my shaving kit in here that's got a mirror, a razor, and a bar of soap in it, okay? I keep that inside this tin because if I'm going to heat water up to shave, it's probably going to be in this stuff anyway. So I just keep the shaving gear in there. It's pretty simple that way. That's pretty much what goes inside here. Now what I do is I put this lid on, and I have this old gold pan we talked about, and it sits right over the top, right in that recess like it was made for it, okay? And that goes in the skillet, just like that, okay? All right, so I've got an old Everywhere coffee pot here, and inside that, I put a can of flour, and I generally will stuff a rag in there. My rag is drying right now, for I'm using it this morning to wash dishes, but generally I would stuff it inside there, around that, to keep it from rattling. And that goes in separately, just like this, with the handles folded against it, up against the side, just like that, all right? Now, I have a safety grater here for potatoes, but it also makes a great rack over the fire for cooking if you want to. And it goes in here on its side, basically just like that, and sits on the side. I have a tin of hot chocolate here. That goes in here. I have a desert water bag here for collecting water and keeping it at camp. That goes inside here. I have a butcher steel here that just kind of lays down the side somewhere because it's pretty long. It doesn't fit in my utensil bag. My utensil bag, which is right here, is a pretty simple affair. It's just a sleeve. It's got a pair of old tongs in it, a carbon steel spatula, an old wooden handled fork, and a spoon with the back end bent for picking up pots off the fire, pouring things like coffee pots, pouring things like my large pot. I use this for lots and lots of stuff, as well as for eating and measuring, okay? And it doesn't take a lot there of utensils to get a lot done. As long as you've got a decent belt knife, you're good to go. So I just stash those in that bag. That keeps them kind of neat and together. And I put them in here right beside the pot. We're gonna have more room in here than we're gonna use before it's over with, I can tell you, okay? We don't have this thing full by any means. The other thing that goes on our coffee pot is our cup. I usually put that just like that and set it right on top of the flour, just like that, okay? Then I stuff my rag around it. Right there it goes, all right? That's pretty much all of the cookware. Now I can just set this right here. I also have a set of fire irons that we've talked about. And these fire irons will sit in here sideways pretty easy. I just move this thing out of the way, slide this down in here sideways at an angle like this. Take the other one and do the same thing on top of that one. And those will stack neatly right there to the edge, 18 inches long, so it doesn't come out. Roll a paper towel in there, close the lid. The only thing that's separate is this cooler that you would have to carry in. All right, guys, we're getting a lot of wind up here on the ridge today, and I hope it's not affecting this video too much, but I appreciate you joining me today for this part 3 in our series while we're packing up the chuck box. We'll move on to part 4 and talk about the camp box and tool and maintenance box next. Stay with me. I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, for our business, for all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can, guys. Thanks.